You don't need a luxury kitchen to prepare gourmet meals. My name is Dennis. I live in a mobile home in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. A while back, I did a recipe for my website and my YouTube channel on a roast duck with a port reduction sauce, and that came from a restaurant trade journal. Or I modified it from a restaurant trade journal. And just to explain those journals, they're magazines that only go out to businesses and industries. So, for example, the advertisements in that trade journal might be for commercial ice machines or a restaurant steam table. Items that the average homeowner probably wouldn't be interested in purchasing, right? Well, I like these trade journals, and the daytime maitre d' over at Ming Dynasty here in Goleta saves those magazines for them because they often have in them recipes that chefs have developed for their restaurant. Could be someplace in Philadelphia or Chicago, Houston, whatever. And that's where that duck recipe came from. And this month, he gave me a magazine, and there's a very similar recipe. But this one was better because it had a stuffing that was made with white rice and wild rice. And I read through the recipe and I thought, I can do better than that. I can really ramp this thing up. So that's what I want to do today. I want to do this roast duck with a port reduction sauce, and I'm going to do a 3 rice, white rice, brown rice, wild rice stuffing with onions and caramelized shallots and fresh sage and pork sausage meat. This ought to be really good. So let's talk about some of the ingredients I'm going to be using today. Most of the ingredients here are easily available in the grocery store. This is a 6-pound duck that I bought at the grocery store. You need a duck that's about 5 to 6 pounds. That's 2 1/4 to 2 3/4 kilograms. I give the metric equivalents because these videos end up on the internet. And then these are shiitake mushrooms. You can use creminis if you want to. I really like shiitake, so I don't mind spending extra to get them. This was the problem. The local grocery store, which is in walking distance, unfortunately doesn't carry raw wild rice. I have to drive a decent distance, a goodly amount, to get wild rice. However, the store did have this pre-cooked, ready in 2 minutes, wild rice. It looked good. I tasted it. It seems like it'll be okay, so I'm going to use this wild rice today. Now, this is my brown rice. This is my white rice. I don't have long grain white rice. Normally I do, but I'm out of it. However, I do have arborio rice. This is expensive rice to use, but I've got it. I've had it for a while. I might as well use it up. So I'm going to be using my arborio rice, but feel free to use long grain white rice for this. I have 2 shallots here, and to be honest, I'm not crazy about the flavor of shallots, but when I caramelize them, cook them long enough so they turn into a golden color, then they're really delicious. I love caramelized shallots. So that's what I'm going to do with my shallots here. This is my blue bottle of regular pure cooking olive oil. I call this cooking olive oil. It has a higher smoke point. I don't use extra virgin olive oil for frying and sauteing. It has a lower smoke point. I use extra virgin olive oil for flavoring, not for cooking. This is my cooking olive oil. And this is a good port that I bought because I only need a 1/4 cup, but I can certainly enjoy drinking whatever's left in the bottle. And then finally, 2 things. Penultimately, this is my sage. I bought this at the store, and as soon as I got it home, it's fresh sage. I put it in water to keep it fresh until I was ready to use it. This is my frozen homemade chicken stock. You can use, if you want, the store-bought chicken broth. That's fine. I've done that before, but I work a lot with whole chickens, and because the price is so good. It's the most economical way to buy chicken. I fillet off the meat that I want, the breast meat, the thigh meat. I even fillet off the drumstick meat. And then all the bones, the trim, everything that you would normally discard, I put that in a Ziploc bag in the freezer. And when I get enough of it, and I have a day when I want to make stock, I put all that chicken trim into a large pot with water, a mirepoix of carrot, onion, and celery, some herbs and spices. And then what I do is I freeze it in 1-cup containers, pop out the ice, put them in Ziploc bags, and store it in the freezer. I almost always have chicken stock in my freezer, and I've also got a lot of turkey stock also in my freezer. I'm using homemade chicken stock today. This is about 3 cups of chicken stock. There isn't a lot of servings here on a duck. I would consider this to be 4 good pieces after you eliminate all the stuff like the wings. There's not a lot of meat on the wings. There's certainly no meat on the back. So I'm going to use poultry shears to cut this duck up into 4 good serving size pieces, and then I'll be browning that later on. I want to cut off the wings here without damaging the breast meat. So I'm going to start from the bottom and just work down to where I can find the joint. This is kind of like doing a chicken, really, except that the joints are tighter and they're more difficult to pop open. So there's the joint for the duck wing. And I very successfully managed to keep away from the breast meat. I don't know whether you can hear that patter or not, but that is rain on the roof. There are the 2 wings off. I'm going to leave the legs on. I'm going to leave those attached. I'm going to trim off a lot of this excess here. Skin and fat. I put a bowl to the side to hold everything in. I'll sort through that afterwards. Obviously you need a good sharp knife to do something like this. Now, using poultry shears, I'm going to cut down through the center of the rib cage just to one side, because there'll probably be a keel in there, right there, like there is in chicken. With poultry shears, you can just cut right down through all the bones. And I got a lot of skin to cut down through here. I'm going to cut down through the breast meat to expose the bone again, and then cut down through all of that. Some of this gets really tough to cut through, but persistence pays off. And then there's a nice thick, there it is, wishbone in there. So there's my duck open, bit of gizzard right there. I don't need the back, and I don't need this tail section. Right in here there's a big thick pelvic bone that I'm going to work around. I don't need to put that in my pot, other than I'll save all of this for stock later on. So I want to just work right down alongside that pelvic bone. Cut the meat free. And then once I get down past the leg joints, there's where the legs attach right to the pelvis. So that's why it's good to cut right close to the pelvis, so you can cut right through the joint. Then I can just cut down through these rib bones and separate it. It's not that difficult. Once you know where to cut, you just cut through things. On this side, I'm going to check to see where my leg meat is. So I'm going to cut down through the skin first to find the leg meat. I'm going to work around that so I don't destroy any leg meat. And then, same thing, cut down through any of the bones that are in there. Separate any of the skin. And there's the leg. I can trim this off. So that's a nice full duck leg. And there's a full duck breast with the rib bones attached. I'm going to do that as is. I'm not going to debone any of that. So I have my other side to do here. If I'm making this look simple, It really is, sort of. I mean, this is the first time I've ever sectioned a duck like this. I don't cook with duck very often, but I have done so many chickens down through the decades. I probably have done a couple hundred chickens, if not more. You get to know where everything is. I mean, a duck isn't all that much different from a chicken as far as where all the bones are. So it's not all that difficult. It just takes some practice. Once you learn where everything is and learn where to cut, practice makes things easier over time. I'm heating a large skillet on the stove here, to which I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of butter and then some of my cooking olive oil. This is just regular pure olive oil. I'm going to use this for browning. I want to brown my duck pieces very well. So this is over medium-high heat. And I have so much here, I'm not going to be able to brown it all at the same time. I think I'm going to do 2 pieces each time. Just get these browned really well. And while those are browning, I'm going to start my rice. My duck is doing very well. It's making a lot of noise in there. Yeah, that's looking good. I put a splatter screen on that because otherwise it makes a mess of my stove. I've got a pan heating on the stove into which I'm going to put about 1.25 cups. This is about 300 milliliters of my chicken stock. And this is 1/2 cup or about 85 grams of brown rice. That's going to take the longest to cook. Normally brown rice cooks in about 35 to 45 minutes. I'm going to undercook this a little bit because I want a spoon here. Because later on this is going to go into the oven. So I'm going to cook it for about 20 minutes, and then I'm going to add the white rice to that because the white rice takes less time to cook. I wanted you to see my browned duck. Isn't that beautiful? This is not fully cooked all the way through. If you can see over here in this corner the colors of the liquid isn't running clear. It's pink there, there's some pink liquid there. That's fine. The browning is just simply to brown the surface. These are going to go into the oven afterwards with the stuffing and finish cooking. My timer went off on my rice. So that's been cooking for 20 minutes. It's certainly undercooked for brown rice, but I'm going to add to that 1/2 cup of arborio rice. That weighed about 100 grams. And I'm going to bring that back up to a boil, and I'm going to boil that for about 10-12 minutes. That will cook my arborio rice most of the way through and do some more cooking of my brown rice. I have 2 large shallots here. You can either use 2 large ones, 4 small ones, whatever is available. I'm going to slice these kind of thin because I want to caramelize these. I don't care for the flavor of shallots. In fact, the first time I experimented with shallots, I cooked some up to taste them to see where I might put them. And the only thought that came to mind was put them in the trash. But I had bought all these shallots with which to experiment. And that's an end. I'm not going to bother with that. And I didn't know what to do with them. So I ended up caramelizing them to see what they would taste like. And then the flavor was delicious. And I thought this flavor would go great with the flavor of clams. So that's how I came up with my recipe for linguine with clam sauce. I'm heating up my skillet again with some butter and then a couple tablespoons or so of my cooking olive oil again. swirl that around the pan. I gave this a wipe. I wiped out most of the dark bits because they were just too dark from browning the duck, that I didn't think that fond would contribute a lot. They were like black bits rather than brown bits, so I removed those. And then here are my shallots. Going to reduce my heat to medium. And I'm going to cook these until they're caramelized. That's probably going to take at least 10, if not 15 minutes. So there is my cooked rice. Very little, almost no liquid in the bottom. So I measured that liquid right for the brown rice and the white rice, the arboreal rice. If you have raw wild rice, then put that in the pan with the liquid and the brown rice at the same time, because they both have the same amount of cooking time. Cook it about 20-25 minutes, then add your white rice rather, and cook it another 10-12 minutes. And then it'll still be undercooked, but that's fine because things are going to go into the oven. That'll finish the cooking of the rice. Because I'm using ready in 2 minutes pre-cooked wild rice, I can wait to put it in at the end. I'm going to stir this in, cover this pan, and just let this sit until I'm ready to start assembling my stuffing. So there's the base of my stuffing. There's a lot more that has to go in there. I'm ready to dice my onion now. In the meantime, I turn the heat off under my shallots because they were done, and then I just transferred them to the same pan as the rice because they're all going to go, it's all going to go together into the stuffing. Now I'm ready to start dicing my onion. If you've seen my other videos, you know I have my own way of doing this. I'm going to cut down through this. This is one large onion. I'm going to use the entire onion. And I'm just going to cut across here and cut this into not a small dice, kind of a medium chop, because I like my stuffing to be just redolent with onion and sage. So I have the rest of my onion to do here, and then I can start sauteing this. With my onions all chopped now, place those in my skillet and cook these over medium-high heat. I may even put a cover on this. I don't need to caramelize my onions. I just want to cook them until they're tender and translucent. That shouldn't take more than 5 or 6 minutes. Okay, we're coming down to the home stretch. I only have a few more things to dice, and then I'll be ready to start assembling everything into a casserole dish and put it in the oven. The next thing I need to do is start chopping my celery. Just going to cut these into long strips. I'm not going to make these too small. Not looking for a really fine dice. And then once it's cut like this into long strips, then you can just cut it in half basically, and then just start cutting down through to get your dice. I left the leaves on because I do like the celery leaves. I think they do add a nice flavor. I have my shiitake mushrooms to do next. I remove the stems. Typically you remove the stems on these mushrooms because they're kind of not quite woody, but they're chewy. They're certainly not as tender as the mushroom caps. So I'm going to chop all these up. I've got about a dozen of these shiitake mushrooms here. These are fairly large. If you find smaller ones, use more. I'm going to pull off about 10 or 12 sage leaves here. And I'm going to give this a fairly decent chop. I don't have to chop this as fine as you might chop Italian parsley. That's good enough. Finely chopped enough, but certainly not reduced down to a really fine chop like parsley would be. I brought my heat up under my skillet again. And now I want to saute my celery to get this kind of tender, maybe 5 minutes. Mushrooms are like little sponges. They're going to absorb fat. So be prepared to add more oil to the pan as needed. See, that's soaked up all that fat already. I want to saute these mushrooms only 2 or 3 minutes just to get them tender. My last step now is to cook up half of that sausage meat. I love sausage meat in stuffing. And I'm looking at this thinking I might even put in the whole pound. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put in the whole pound. This seems like more is better. So that is 1 pound or 450 grams, roughly, of sausage meat. And I want to break this up and cook this. I'm cooking this over medium-high heat. I want to make sure this is thoroughly cooked all the way through. You might be wondering, where is everything going? All this stuff that I've been cooking all along. Well, I've just been dumping it into the same pan in which I cooked my rice. It's all going to go into the stuffing, so there's no point in dirtying a whole bunch of dishes and bowls. Just throw it all into one pan, and now I'm getting ready to start mixing my stuffing. So here are all my stuffing ingredients. Rice and everything. Oh, that is looking so good. Now you can see why I'm doing this in a casserole dish. Can you imagine trying to get all that stuffing into a duck? It's just not going to happen. Okay, before I put my sage in, here's my sage. I want to taste this. So this is my infamous red handle tasting spoon. It goes into my mouth, not the pot. Okay, yes. That needs some salt. So I'm going to put in a good generous pinch or two of salt. And then I need paper towel, because I'm going to be grinding in some pepper. But I want to hold the handle with paper towel so I don't get my pepper mill all dirty. One more time, tasting. No more salt, that is perfect. Now I'm going to put in my fresh sage. And get that all mixed in. Going to press that down a little bit. That is moist enough. I have on the side some of my unused stock. I'm actually going to be using that stock for making the reduction sauce. But this is so moist, it doesn't need any stock in there for moisture. Now, I'm going to arrange my duck pieces on top. I'm heating my oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 190 degrees Celsius. I'm going to bake these not by time, but by temperature. I'm going to use my digital thermometer to check the temperature of those duck breasts. I want to get the duck meat up to an internal temperature of about 170 degrees Fahrenheit. I can do a little bit less because as it rests, it's going to come up by 5 degrees. But I want my goal temperature, which is a safe temperature for all fowl, is 170 degrees Fahrenheit or 77 degrees Celsius. To start my port reduction sauce, I've got my skillet again. I washed that out. I'm heating this over medium-high heat right now. That's the remainder of my chicken stock. Remember, I started off with 3 cups, but I used 1 1/4 cups in my rice. That's all the remainder of my stock. And then I want to pour into that about 1/4 cup of my port. I checked this port, by the way. I tasted it. I did well. This is a good port. And then this is optional. For a little bit more of a fruity flavor, I'm going to put in some Cointreau, which will add a little bit of an orange flavor. And then finally, this is about 1/4 cup, 1 ounce, 28 grams of dried cranberries. I'm going to bring this up to a boil, and then I want to reduce this down to about half, maybe even a little bit less than half of its current volume. This is my casserole dish. Lots of steam coming up. Ah, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? So that is my duck and my stuffing. I'm going to place that aside and bring in a dish. The way I would plate this, duck is all dark meat because they fly, unlike chickens that do not fly, and therefore chickens have white meat. That's their breast meat. Ducks and geese, because they fly, their breast meat is dark meat. So if you like white meat, stick with chicken. Don't go with duck or goose. Plenty of stuffing. That looks plenty moist. And then here is my reduction sauce. I want to stir this up a little bit. I tasted this, by the way, and it is just incredible. It's wonderfully sweet. It's a little bit sweet. Just like so. It has a citrus flavor to it from the Cointreau, but it also has a nice fruity flavor to it. So there it is, my roast duck with port reduction sauce and my 3 rice stuffing. If this tastes as good as it looks, I'll have another winner here. I want to get some of my reduction sauce on that. Cut off a little piece of my duck breast meat. Oh, that is so tender, so delicious. Oh, that is good. Now for my 3 rice stuffing. Oh, that is wonderful. Savory and delicious. I'm just shocked at how good this is. This tastes so wonderful. So, excuse me, I'm going to go enjoy my dinner. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.